This episode of the E-commerce Playbook podcast is brought to you by ShipStation. Whether you're shipping from your house or a warehouse, ShipStation can help you increase your profitability with discounts on USPS and UPS rates up to 82%. Go to shipstation.com/thread today and sign up for your free 60-day extended trial. That's shipstation.com/thread.
All right, we're going back to our old school roots. Maybe the technology is a little better than when we started, but we have the real OGs here on this episode today. A very special episode. So Richard, he's pretty OG, but this even predates Richard today. So I'm taking over as host. We've brought Cory out from behind his producer role. So you'll see him here. Cory, who normally is producing the podcast. And then we've got a special guest, a fellow holiday. I didn't create an AI bot of a younger version of me. That is literally just my brother, Casey, who's going to be joining us. And we're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to tell you part of the story that not many people know about Common Thread Collective, QALO, and something called the Arch Network. So stay tuned. Exciting stuff today. Cory, you want to say hi to people and introduce yourself? Have you come out from behind the camera yet?
No, I don't think I've been on the podcast since we were doing Uncommon Finds way back in the original second office when we just had nothing to talk about and we were just talking about the internet. It was like original internet 1.0 stuff back when Bitcoin wasn't even a thing.
Yeah, you could scroll back to the beginning of our YouTube channel maybe and find those. So Cory is employee number 1 at CTC. Many people don't know that, but he has been with me and us since the very, very beginning. Before there was anyone else, there was Cory. And then Casey is my brother. He even predates Cory in my life. He goes back 34. How old are you now? 34?
35.
35. Dang, we are so old. 35 years.
No,
he's my brother and the co-founder of QALO, and was with us in the very early days of the instance. But Casey, what else would you tell people about yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Oh gosh. So it's interesting. I never considered myself this, but I guess I'm a bit of an e-commerce dinosaur that I kind of disappeared off the face of the earth for the last 2 years. So I could have been like the extinct dinosaur that has now since come back. But I started in e-com when I was in my early 20s, and this was in 2012 in the early days, which led me to an office above the Blue Frog Cafe in Orange, California, which was also the headquarters of Common Thread Collective, which was Arch Network at the time, I believe. And so I was just a guy that had started a silicone wedding ring company in Los Angeles with a co-founder of mine that was squatting in an office. I just moved in with my mom. It's a really good story. I just moved in with my mom after getting married. So I was a newlywed living with my mom, looking for a place to work out of. And I found your office. And that was really the origin story of QALO and what we built.
Yeah. So it's funny because I saw Casey. He's now made an appearance on Twitter. He's trying to push. He's a lot bigger on TikTok. You go check him out on TikTok. He's got
don't now though, because they just deleted my TikTok.
Oh, never mind. So yeah. By the way, TikTok, if you're listening, we got to get his account back. We're working on that. But I saw Casey interacting with you were in a thread with like Amanda Getz and Joe Putnam and like a few other like Twitter people, and I was like, this is so weird. Like Casey, who's been like absent from the world, has shown up back into the D2C e-com scene, and he feels like he's a newcomer. He feels like he's new to the scene, but really he predates the scene in a lot of ways. That I've seen like the Pura Vida guy come back, and I feel like some of these like early founders that were like, wait, I didn't get famous when I was building the e-commerce thing. I want to get famous.
We missed out on all the credit that we should have gotten when we were building.
That's right. I've seen like Moise Ali, and these other guys that have gone on like that sold in like, let's call it like D2C 1.0 or whatever. They've come back now and are getting all the attention. And so a few of you founders are like, wait a second, what happened? We were the early band. And so you guys are coming back to make a scene. So we're here to help you. We're here to help platform the D2C 1.0 winners, but also it's something I connect with too, because I think a lot of people would see CTC as building in public, but the reality is like we were doing CTC for 7 years before the Twitter thing ever happened, right? There was a lot of days before any of that occurred, but I'm curious, what's brought you back? Why are you excited to jump back in, Casey?
Oh gosh. So I think I guess post-selling QALO. So I exited QALO in early 2020. And I think after you sell anything, you go through a bit of a journey and a reflection period on it. And my wife's Australian, so I moved to Australia for 2 years. And it wasn't necessarily to run from anything. It was just the next right step for my family. So I did that. And I spent 2 years working in venture capital. And I would say 20% what I worked in was e-commerce, but the rest was all these different industries that I had exposure to. So different software companies, fintech, insurtech. And it was interesting, but I also thought to myself that I think the experience you have to date is really meaningful and it's on purpose. And so when I came back in early this year, so early 2023, when I came back, I realized that a lot of what my experience was colliding with what I love doing, which was coaching. So when I ran the venture fund, we had 25 portfolio companies. So I spent a lot of time coaching those founders and how to scale a company. So it wasn't just e-commerce specific, but it was a lot of different types of companies. And I realized I loved working with the founders and or CEOs of these companies to try and navigate scale. And so since coming back, I've collided the worlds of what I did, which was scale a rapid growth e-com company, with coaching. And now that's what I do is coaching full time. And so me getting on Twitter and coming back is a combination of a couple things. One, what you mentioned, where people didn't really build in public when we were building, even early days of Common Thread Collective and early days of QALO. That wasn't something that we did. And now you have this large community of people, or e-commerce has grown substantially, that are looking for what I would probably call the gray beards of the industry, like who has been doing it for a long time. And I think that the two of you represent those gray beards, right? I've got a couple sneaking in as well that have been around for a while, but now it's this, like, especially during COVID, e-com boomed even more. And now you have all of these people that are looking for help. And when I started QALO, I call myself the underdog entrepreneur because I was a college dropout that had also dropped out of firefighting school, that was trying to be an actor, that ended up building an e-com company. And I didn't really have a lot of resources available to me apart from the advisors that I had, people like the two of you, to help me scale it. And so a lot of that has been me coming back and now realizing I have this unique experience to date. I sort of stepped out of the well and experienced other industries and realized that e-com is really something that I understand. I'm uniquely qualified to talk about it based on my own experience. And so I can help a lot of people. So that's part of why I think I've since come back, is I've realized, carved out an identity for myself and done the reflection post business that I have had up to this point. And then also realized a lot of people live on Twitter, and I'd spent time on other platforms creating content like Instagram and TikTok, and going to where your people are and where your tribe is valuable. And there's a massive D2C Twitter community that it's been really cool and has been very accepting of me. So that's partially why I'm now just showing up on Twitter. And it seems like, what the heck? I thought Taylor was an only child. Now all of a sudden there's this other guy using his name. What's going on here? And that's me. And so long-winded.
Do people even know? Like, I have people connected the dots? I think there's sometimes that people have no idea.
No, I don't think people know at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so what I thought would be interesting is, so much of our story, because we joined Twitter after many years and like CTC was already a thing, we had a bunch of people and clients and history. I don't always think that the beginning of the story has been made very clear. And I think the same is probably true for QALO. And so I know that a lot of the people that we communicate with, whether it's the audience of this podcast, is early stage entrepreneurs. And it's really easy to sort of play the comparison game to sort of see, like, look at it, the Ridge founders and all these people, and like the Operators podcast is a good example. Well, these guys are all 9-figure businesses. And so you're sort of comping yourself to their experiences, and it's kind of hard to relate to it in some ways, because if you're in the early days, it's just not like that, And so I think it would be good to go back. And the thing I want to do is I want to reflect on what it was like for us to start. And then I want to say, why did it work? Like, why did we actually succeed? I'd be curious to reflect. And then would it succeed the same way today? Those are the kinds of things I want to reflect on a little bit. So Cory, maybe you could start us out, because you were like the documentarian that was present in the very beginning. So Casey mentioned our very first office together was 3 of us in a room that was like maybe 100 square feet, like very small, atop of a bakery in Orange, California. We bought the furniture at IKEA, loaded it in your tiny little car, and tried to bring it up and build it.
Terrible.
Yeah. My old like 1992 Lexus, and built it, some IKEA desks, and sat in a crappy little office together. And that was CTC and QALO launching. What do you remember about those early days, and how would you describe it?
Man, well, so at the time, Arts Network, we had Evo Shield as a client, which is like the darling of the baseball industry at the time. And we didn't really have like a job for them. I don't even remember what we did for them, but I remember we started this thing. We were starting a blog for them. It's really why I kind of came on, was like, I came on to be a blogger. Which is funny. I would sit there each day and make up wild topics to write for this Evo Shield blog. And it was like, and then, so the backtrack, I love the internet. I love everything about the internet. I love social media. I love Twitter. Nobody sees me on Twitter, but I see everything on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter more than anybody else. I'm just a lurker on Twitter. And like, there's so many times that thoughts go through my mind of like, Casey always calls me a troll because I'm like an internet troll on Twitter, but I just have kind of stopped myself from being who I want to be on the internet because of who CTC is and stuff. And I was blogging for Evo Shield and running two Facebook accounts for them. And it was like before like House of Highlights and these things, that what I used to do was like find videos of like little kids getting like blasted in football and like post them.
Yeah.
And I would get millions and millions of views on these videos. And it was just repurposing things before copyright problems and all these things were. So I really think that like our basis for all this is that like, we love the internet. And I think we kind of understand the internet, which then brought us to paid media, which is the new thing that was coming. When we started, I don't even think we were spending $1 on Facebook.
No, not
first
at all.
Couple months.
None.
In that office.
Hey, one thing that's really important in there that I think is interesting is everybody talks about vision and having big vision. And it's like in the early days, we had no idea what we were. Like from a CTC perspective, QALO, obviously we knew what we were selling, but you guys, it was just like, it was kind of what's the next client that we can take on and what can we do for them? And then it just organically grew based on the needs of customers. It wasn't, I don't know that we were sitting in that office going, oh, CTC is going to be this massive Facebook marketing company or, paid ads or anything.
We had presence. I think that's one of the things that we've always been, is like we were in the game. We were there and we were figuring out what was working all the time. And so it's funny, organic social at the time, this was back in like an era where organic reach on social was huge, right? And so Evo Shield was this cool, and we had come out of Power Balance and building a brand in the sports world. And so we knew consumer in sports. Cory played professional baseball. I played professional baseball. Jordan played in the NFL. So we knew sports. We knew selling consumer product, and we knew social media. Like that was like our world. And so we would sell doing organic social. And so we ran this blog, we called it The Dish. And really we built House of Highlights before House of Highlights existed. Like it was that Cory was finding these clips on the internet, and literally we would post them on Evo Shield's.
Or was it?
No, Facebook. This was really Facebook.
Oh, early
and
Facebook days. Okay.
Yeah, their Facebook page, we would get hundreds of thousands of views on these clips every day. Like big organic reach numbers. And so we were trying to build that and trying to figure out we wanted to siphon it off of Facebook onto their website. So we tried to build this blog on their website to start pulling the traffic, because we were having trouble converting organic traffic into sales, like a very classic problem. But it was literally just like, okay, let's just try and solve this thing for this brand in a way that was there. And then through that connection, we met Eat the Ball. Our second biggest client ever at CTC was this is an insane company. They were called Eat the Ball. It was started by a guy who was one of the Red Bull founders that created freeze-dried bread that was already baked in the shape of sports balls. Okay, this is sounds insane. This is real. You can look this up. Eat the Ball. And we, through Jordan's contacts, got the business to do an equity deal with Russell Wilson to be the face of Eat the Ball. This is insane. It's like literally you couldn't make this up. But and then we would do we had a commercial freezer in this tiny 100 square foot office.
Yes.
No refrigerator.
No,
just a freezer.
No refrigerator. Just a freezer.
A giant freezer.
Giant commercial freezer.
We would just microwave Eat the Balls at lunch, and that's all we would eat. We would take down 6 to 8 Eat the Balls a day just in the office.
Yeah, we'd put peanut butter and jelly on some Eat the Balls, and that was all we ate all day. But we would have these girls on a Saturday. We would have these random, girls come and pass out Eat the Balls in sports parks. Like that was part of what. So the point is just, we had, Casey, you're saying, vision. We were I don't know, what will someone pay us to do, and what could we do that would be interesting and novel? And we were just in it and iterating and trying and figuring it out all the time. And we had enough network and relationship and connections from our previous life to get people to give us a chance, I think that was a lot of the early days. And then like, I think QALO was sort of similar where like, it's funny. I just came across a video of Greg, the classic Greg early ads where Greg was the first employee at QALO that became the fourth person in this office.
Yeah, he was QALO's Cory.
Like,
yeah,
exactly. We would go to the park and like film videos of like doing, it's that video where Greg swings with the golf club and breaks it over his knee because he's so mad. And it's like Cory filming it. It's the four of us, but just like no business strategy, no idea other than like what might work. And we were just going to be in it and go.
Yeah. And an interesting parallel story to tie it back to Eat the Ball. So QALO, we came up with the idea. I got married in May of 2012, and Ted, my partner, got married a few months after I did. And so we, one day in passing, came up with the idea for QALO, for the silicone wedding ring. And we spent the next 6 or 7 months building it, and then launched it on March 1st of 2013 was when QALO launched. And we had no clue what we were doing. And so for us, it was like completely bootstrapped, just send rings to as many people as we possibly can. Same type of thing. Like we didn't, and one thing I talk about is the value of not knowing what you're doing is that you don't know what you should do. You just do what feels right or what is addressing the needs of customers. And you just follow that around. Like you follow the traction versus going, oh, I'm going to, and not a knock on these podcasts that have $100 million brands, but what they're doing at 100 million has no relevancy to what you're doing up to it, like in the early days at all. And so for us, what we were doing was like, let's just get rings to as many people as possible. So I had, in order to save money, I'd moved down to, I was living in Los Angeles, and the restaurant I started that the idea of QALO came up with was in Beverly Hills. And I had moved down south to Orange County, which if you are familiar with Southern California, nobody crosses that chasm. Like that's people in Orange County stay in Orange County, people in LA stay in LA. So I came down, and then I was commuting 5 days a week to still bartend and wait tables while trying to build QALO out of my mom's living room. And so in November of 2013, I actually looked this up today because I was just stumbling upon old Black Friday numbers. So in November of 2013, we were doing $9,000 of revenue at QALO. So, and at that point I was like, I'm going to retire. We're this is it. We're cashing it in here. This is an unbelievable growth rate. And I remember I went to Ted and I said, hey, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit the restaurant. And he managed the restaurant. So it was an uncomfortable conversation. I'm going to quit. And he goes, absolutely not. We do not have enough money for QALO to pay you. And I'm like, okay, well, here's what I can live on. So I tell him and I go, I'm going to quit. And he said, it doesn't matter. You're not quitting. And I remember I went to Taylor and I said, I think I need to quit and go to QALO. And he said, quit. I will pay you whatever the difference is that you need from whatever we are doing at Common Thread at that time. And so I quit without telling Ted. So I went to a different manager at my restaurant. I quit. He found out later. I made X amount of dollars from QALO. And then my first paid job was filming an Eat the Ball corporate lunch. So my first job that I
did not even remember that.
The first job I had with Common Thread, and Cory, I can give you the Eat the Ball lunch video. It's in there. So I was like, what can I do? And you're like, oh, we're supposed to do a corporate lunch for Eat the Ball at Evo Shield, I think is where it was. And it was like, I was like, yeah, I've been working in the film and TV industry. I have a camera. You're like, bring it, shoot the lunch. So I basically made an Eat the Ball lunch highlight reel. And that's what I got paid for in the early days. And that was like November, December. And then we did 12,000 in December for QALO, and then did 3 million the next year. So the rest was history. But that was like the first moment of transitioning from working in this restaurant to working. And you were that bridge, guys. So appreciate that.
Yeah. This episode of the E-commerce Playbook podcast is brought to you by ShipStation. ShipStation helps you save time by automating your shipping and returns, and keeps your costs down with discounts on USPS and UPS rates up to 82%. ShipStation also offers effortless integration everywhere you sell online, including Amazon, Etsy, eBay, Shopify, and more. Over 130,000 companies have grown their e-commerce businesses with ShipStation, and 98% of companies that stick with ShipStation for a year become customers for life. So go to shipstation.com/thread today and sign up for your free 60-day extended trial. That's shipstation.com/thread.
Well, there's something in here, though, that one of the things that we reflect a lot on now, we're all married. Cory's about to get married. I have 3 kids. Casey's got 3 kids. Is that one of the biggest limitations that we have in our life is our lack of availability to that posture.
Yes.
Is that we could do that because of where we were in life. And that's actually such a treasure, like, because the early roots of a thing require that kind of effort, absent value. You have to be willing to do a thing when it's not worth anything yet, in order, in many cases, to make it that. And some people's life just becomes prohibitive, where it's like they literally practically can't do that because the standard of living's reached a certain point, or the practicalities of the cost of their life. Just, I couldn't go back to being that person anymore.
No. And it's all in is different at each stage of life. And when someone else is, and I think you have to be all in. That's just a prerequisite for anything that you want to build. You have to be all in. And for us, then we were all in. It was just, that was our livelihood. Then you get older and you take on more external obligations, and your all in is different. And so if somebody else's all in is more substantial than yours, a lot of the times they're going to win. Or you run into the situation that we're in, where in our mid to late 30s, we have to be really effective with the time that we have.
Yeah. There's no way I could do this and start what we did now at this point in my life. Like, there's months where Taylor would be like, there's no money, no pay this month. And we're like, all right,
another Eat the Ball,
keep going.
Make another PB&J. Yeah. That's it.
Exactly. Keep going. Hopefully that the beers go on sale on Friday for extra at the hot dog place by the office. But it was just like, but that wasn't like, I mean, I always say this, it wasn't about the business. It was about, like, I was doing this with my best friends, and we were creating something, and we had dreams of CTC to become 20 people. It's like this 20-person boutique agency. And it's like, we got to almost 200 people. It's just wild to think of, like, from that to what it is today. And everybody thinks of it as this big thing, but it was nothing.
Yeah, it was nothing for a really long time. And the clarity of even, like, what is your product? What are you selling? Every deck was different. Every sales pitch was different. Everything was, what does the customer want to hear? But there's something about that. Like, when you chase the market, what you find, like, a lot of people, they think like product market fit begins with product. Like, I have this really clear idea of a thing that I'm going to do, and then, like, the market meets me at product. But in our world, it was very much like the product evolved to find the market. And then as Facebook ads became the market that brands were going to grow on, that became the product. And so it was like, we learned into the market. Now, Casey, you're sort of a little on the other side, where I think you did the thing that's actually much harder to do, which is you magically created a product that had a market that was unrealized. Like, the market didn't know it needed it yet. I think that's a lot of times what people think about, but I think it's actually the way harder way to do that. So, like, I'm curious now, as you think about it, like, what, like, find the market or find the product? How do you think about that sequence?
Well, it's interesting is my exposure in VC for 2 years gave me a lot of insight into this exact thing of people going, hey, I have the solution. Now let's go find the problem, or chasing the problem and then molding a solution to meet that problem. And we used to have this saying after we would finish a pitch meeting, and it would be, there's another solution looking for a problem to solve. And I think at the root of it is you, and this is what you were talking about with the way that we grew, is we were just chasing the problem. We were knowing the customers and knowing these companies who we were trying to serve so well that we were understanding their deeply rooted problem and then creating a solution to that problem, thus sort of creating traction in the market and generating that product market fit. And we also, what we had as part of the fund that I ran was a studio. So it was people that were responsible for finding problems in a market and then trying to create a product to scale, which it's definitely not an easy thing to do. It doesn't matter what you're chasing first. It's a really challenging thing to do. But I think to the point of at the root of it was, even QALO was, I personally had the problem. And so it was a solution that I was just trying to create for myself. And because I personally had the problem, I had an innate insight into what was annoying about it and what I was solving for, that then the ring was created based on the problem that I personally had. So instead of needing to go out to the market to try and discover it. And then, what I will say is, we still, even the first version of the ring, drastically understanding customers and how they behaved and how they responded to it and why they needed to wear it was something that we progressively moved along on. And I think one thing that is, to some people, they would see it as a limitation. And I think in some ways it is. But when you don't have any money to market, you have to get really creative about ways to market and get people to buy your things. And that means a lot of times it's going, can we just talk to as many customers as we can so we can, one, create awareness of our product, but two, make sure we're creating the best product we have, because we don't have money to waste on advertising. And so I don't think I would ever say that not having money is easier to grow a business than having money. However, there are disciplines that are created when you don't have money that are beneficial that you don't create when you have money to just blow on marketing.
So I think there's something so important there too. Like people, like word of mouth is this like, you know, holy grail of marketing that when you have it, like it feels like you have the wind at your back. And people think of it as this thing that sort of just, you can't control it. I don't know how to make it happen. But I think about what you're describing is, and I think the firefighter wife is such a good example of the way you create word of mouth is you pull ruthlessly on the thread of every customer to understand who they are. And then you equip them with your message and you turn them into like what Seth Godin would call sneezers. And so I think like, so the story is in the early days of QALO, when you're just trying to understand, like you bought a ring, who are you? Why do you care about this? What, like, tell me about your community where like you meet the customer and then you find out, oh, you run a blog and you're connected to this community of first responders. And so maybe you could tell my story and could we partner together? And you're just tugging on every possible thread to figure out where might there be dollars. And you find customers, you meet them, you enable them to tell their story, and it slowly begins to create word of mouth. Like it's literally passing your words directly to customers who pass it to their community. But if you aren't invested in those relational connections to your brand, and it's all programmatic and media and dollars and distribution, like then you don't get human relationship, which is the fabric of word of mouth. Like that's actually what it is. It's a message moving through relationship.
But people don't like it because they don't think it's a shortcut. It feels hard. It feels like it's not going to happen overnight. And to your point, the root of QALO, like QALO's expansion and awareness, we scaled through Facebook. It was spend on Facebook that allowed us to grow really fast. However, to build the foundation and for us to understand who we needed to target on Facebook, we did work off of Facebook first to understand that. And QALO launched through 3 individuals that I will give credit to right here. First is, apart from the hard work and the support that I had around me, like you guys, but from the individuals in terms of the customer. The first was firefighter wife, okay, who posted on her, we sent her rings and she posted on her Facebook about a ring. And within 10 minutes had like 100 comments from other wives of firefighters talking about this product. Okay. So she did that. The other was Andy Dalton, who we sent a ring to, who I knew his wife from going to Texas Christian University years before. I'd only met Andy one time. I Facebook messaged his wife. I said, hey, you guys just got married. Can I send Andy a wedding gift? It's like a total shoot your shot moment. She didn't respond for months. Finally said, sure, send it. Send it to Andy. Andy wears it on the first episode of Hard Knocks, 1.5 million views. All of a sudden awareness just based on that. And then the third is Sam Dancer, slid into my DMs. I knew nothing about CrossFit. We weren't CrossFitters. When QALO started, it wasn't let's go after CrossFit. Sam Dancer, who is a OG CrossFitter, unbelievable human being, slid into my DMs and said, hey, your rings are really cool. Have you ever thought about marketing them to CrossFitters before? And I built a relationship with Sam, and Sam gave us an entry point and awareness into the CrossFit segment, which became a huge catalyst for the future of QALO. None of those things were Facebook marketing. None of it was paid media. And it's a really interesting lesson because that was to your point, those were the only threads we had to pull on. We didn't have any other opportunities.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And those things are so rootsy, again, beginning unexpected, anticipated, and just being present for it. All right. One last thing philosophically, because and Cory, I always go back to a quote of yours when I think about this. And I've been seeing on Twitter, I don't know if you know the guy that runs like the Dad Hat Gang or Dad Gang Hats or whatever it is. Have you seen this guy? He's like building on Twitter.
Yeah.
And
I just know
this is a good shout out for him. He's going to appreciate it.
Yeah. I want to get the name of the company.
Is it Dad Gang?
Right.
Dad
I think it's the Dad Gang. Yeah. Something like that. But they make these really cool hats, and he's been like very public about the progress of Dad Gang Co. On Twitter. Okay. And they've been very public about how they're doing and the growth. And it's early days, right? Like it's that like 0 to 2 million. It's starting to work moment that I think is like peak euphoric state where you've been trying your hardest to make your thing a thing, and all of a sudden it feels like it is, and people are responding and it's growing, but it's still very small. Like I still see the videos of like him shipping out of his living room kind of vibe, you know? And I remember the early days when it was like, at one point, this 100-square-foot room had like 8 of us in it. And it was, you know, the people next door were complaining because we were too loud, and it was mini hoop basketball. And Cory, I go back to this all the time. You said, and I don't know what gave you the foresight to maybe feel this way, but you were like, is this the best it will ever be? Like, does it actually go downhill experientially from this moment on? And it's something I've thought about all the time as we keep trying to grow and you keep trying to reach the next milestone. And I'd be interesting for each of your reflections. Okay. So Cory, we're 12 years into CTC. We've had tons of success, had lots of highs, lots of lows. Casey, you built and sold QALO. You're starting new things. Like, do you believe is that peak moment for the entrepreneur? And if so, is there any way to recreate it, or why? Like, how do you guys reflect on that now, having been through as much as you've been through?
Cory, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think in many ways, yes, it's still the best it ever was or could ever be. And it's because the outcome was not like it was not financial driven at the time. It was not anything more than like just friends doing something that they loved. It was like our own little fantasy factory is what we had. The work was fun. Not that the work that I do is not fun or gratifying, but everything was tackled by everybody. It was like, all right, orders have to be shipped for QALO. Well, let's all get an assembly line right now and trim up rings and do that. And it wasn't the process of it, but it was like doing it in a fun way, because like you weren't afraid to fail at that time. There weren't other people's livelihoods that depended on it. There wasn't healthcare involved. There wasn't people who have children or anything that were depending on a paycheck or anything like that at each time. It was just about the process of doing that with your friends. So I really do think, yeah, it was the best that it ever was or could be. But I do think that a lot of times, like, there's things of CTC has grown so big and all that type of stuff. But I still think that what we've been able to do is still fun and keep that magic there in as much as it could be. I still come to work each day and see my best friends and all that type of stuff. But yeah, no, there was no fear. There was no fear. I think that's what it is. There's no fear in it.
And Cory, do you think, on a question on that, do you think that was a stage of life thing because we didn't have external obligations and so we could operate in that capacity? Or do you think at the age that you are now, you could recreate that?
Yeah, when I first was thinking about it, I was thinking about maybe it was an age of life thing, but I think I could create it again. I really think that I could create it again.
And I know I'm turning the question around, but I want to dissect it a bit. So like, what was it about it? So you've talked about there's a freedom to operate, there's no fear, but what was it about the way it was structured, the way we did things? Was it the office and being in there every day? Was it the way we talked to customers? Was it each other's approach to things? Like, what do you think it was in the nitty gritty of this tiny little office above the Blue Frog?
For me, I think it was like a locker room, really coming off of like sports and baseball. And it's like, think about like my baseball career all the time. And it's like, I could care less about the actual baseball aspect of it. The thing I miss the most is like the locker room and hanging out with the guys, which is really it. And I think that it's like we all went on a golf trip this year together. First time we'd all kind of done something like that together in a while. It was the most fun I've had in a long time, because it was just creating that, what I'll call a locker room vibe, whatever it is. But it was just like freedom to be with your friends and try things and make mistakes and that type of stuff. And I think we could create it again, but I think that it takes the group of people that were there at the time to create that again. And it's because our relationships were way before it was business. Our relationships were as friends doing things like that together before that. So I think it could be created with the right group of people in the right situation, but I don't think creatable in a huge setting with different people that aren't in that same friendship group, I'll call it, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's this thing too, and it's funny because the thing, like evolution of a business is actually becoming aware of the things that can kill you and being able to mitigate those risks such that your likelihood of success increases. But I actually think that so does your corresponding anxiety, because the awareness of all of the threats is a skill, but it's emotionally taxing. So as an example, like we never had a 13-week cash flow forecast, Casey, but yet what's the first thing you do when you go to meet a business is you tell them they've got to have this. That's because but when you're not aware of it, it doesn't create anxiety. But now every day I look at my cash flow forecast and like with the certainty of a mother hen, make sure that the number doesn't go below where I need it to go. So there's something about this ignorance and this naivete of starting out where it's all hope and possibility. It's the overlap of it starting to work. So you have some validation with it could be anything. And you're actually like stupid. And so there's something about that I think like you aren't worried, you aren't acutely aware of all the ways in which you could very well die and how close you are to that I think is something that's really hard to get back. Like, I don't know how to get that version of me back. It's almost like you've seen too much. Yeah. Like in a way that you can't become that kind of person again. I would do it so different. If I were to start over even, I would have such a different set of materials and process and actions versus like that, like carefree, frivolous version of ourselves that we were then.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In the moment, you aren't appreciating it because you're just doing it and that's all you know. And then to your point, you build something later, you look back and you go, I really appreciate that. And then now you operate in this tension of how do I get that level of anxiety-free living back in the current state that I am? But I do think what I will say, to give credit to where like the age and growing bigger businesses, is pressure's a privilege. And that even though the stakes are higher, I think that there is more responsibility that comes along with scale and with growing something that I think is important and is rewarding, that we often instead want to run from and recapture this smaller thing versus appreciating the fact that I've built something that millions of people in the world wish they could. So I think there's a root of gratitude in it as well, but not to get too far on that side. But I think that's important. But going back to it, I think that I'm a massive advocate of behavioral osmosis. So what I mean by that is being in the same room as someone else and you begin to operate the way that they operate, and it creates this really cool alignment that exists just based on the sheer fact that you're sitting next to someone. And I think that it's really hard to recapture that in a fully remote world in today's society. And I think for us early on, it was all of the things you said, Cory, was relevant. Like we were just showing up every day, and egos weren't a thing, and credit wasn't a thing. And we were just building and hoping to achieve this thing that almost felt so far away from us, like that it wasn't even a possibility. So it was just do the right next thing. That was the way that we operated. And I would say one of the most critical elements of that are the hardest to retain as you scale there was cultural alignment internally. The values that we had, the way we operated, the way we made decisions was very collaborative. There was really a ton of cultural alignment. And when you start bringing more people in, I think it's talked about, but even not enough, that as you scale, like trying your best to maintain that cultural alignment is critical to holding onto that magic for as long as you can.
Yeah, and I think that's just real with the expansion of people. There's like very like human law here. I think about this as my family has grown. Like it's something as stupid as like choosing dinner. Well, the more end nodes that we introduce into that system, the more dietary considerations there are. That at some point, somebody all the time is making a concession. They're meeting someone in the thing that they don't actually want to do for the sake of someone else. Which it's not that that's bad necessarily, but the wider the group gets, the more often the reality is that the decision is disappointing to a large number of people.
Yeah.
And this is something I acutely felt as CTC got large, is that like all of a sudden, you know how draining it is that every decision 100 people don't like, like versus like that never was a thing when it was the three of us and we're like, yeah, let's go do the eat the ball conference thing. But literally it got to a point where it's like every decision, and we used to do this thing called the CTC Pulse. We still do it in a different form, but it was like, tell us about your experience of CTC. And I could plot like a graph, a bell curve of satisfaction to dissatisfaction. And it ran the spectrum every month where there were people that were in both camps, that the same decision could receive intense criticism and intense celebration at the same time. And you're just like, oh man, this is like so draining to learn to work through that. It just becomes, to your point, Casey, this idea of alignment just gets disseminated across a lot of people. And it's not that you can't create it or that there aren't moments of it, but it's just a lot harder to achieve.
And I think that sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's a lot of like, this is a personal thing, why I've chosen the lane that I have in CTC. Like being more in the background of it, working in the marketing department, never like wanting to like be Taylor. I've never wanted to run the show. I've never wanted to do that because of the differenceness that comes with all the different people. Is like not who I am as a person.
Yeah. And Tay, I think to your point is, the more layers there are in a business, the higher the expectation of the CEO that's leading it. And in the early days, I think of each other, nobody assumed that the other person had all of the answers. We all just assumed that we were just still trying to figure it out. And I think where the miss is with the layers to a business is people at a lower level that you bring in year 7 of your business assume the CEO should have all the answers. But you're still operating in the same capacity that you were when you had 3 people, which is, I'm just trying to figure out the right next thing to do tomorrow.
Right.
I don't have all of the answers. And so it creates a tension in leadership of cultures that is a really hard thing to navigate. And so that's one point. And then going back to it, I think one question I ask the CEOs that I coach, and they tell me what their revenue target is, and I say, why? Like, and I think that the right answer that's been promoted to a lot of people is bigger is better. Mm-hmm. Bigger is, you got to get to X amount of dollars. That's it. And I think based on even the story we're talking about here is, yes, we wanted to make more money, but would you, some people will have different answers to this question. Would you really have a massive thing, but have none of the magic of close relationships, but you have a ton of wealth? Or would you rather have less wealth and the magic that comes along with having a lot of really close relationships in a small team of 5 to 10 people?
Or is that possible? There's probably a whole separate conversation about whether these things exist, or there's sort of law of expansion that I believe exists in people's lives, where the part about that, and I think you brought it up as the phase of life thing, Casey, is that like people's expectations of their own life increase, meaning their costs increase. And so they need more out of their thing all the time. And so growth, like I'm a big believer that, like, I hear this a lot. The people talk about this idea of like, we're just going to stay small. And it's like, okay, if you're going to do that, you better be willing to keep your life small too. And I think that what people discount in what that would cost you is that you can't expand the cost side of your own personal balance sheet without expanding the revenue side of your own personal balance sheet, which means the company needs to provide more resource, to provide more people, more opportunity. And unless the group is really willing to say, my life is here and it's not going to expand, which I haven't met many of those humans. In fact, I don't know if I know any of those humans. It becomes really hard to sustain that idea. And I don't know many people that are doing it really well.
No, I don't disagree. And I would say I think that in certain businesses, you can control the amount of customers that you take on. I can control the amount of clients that I take on with coaching. So you can control some elements of it. But in theory, especially in e-com, if you're getting better, they'll demand you get bigger. And therefore, that's just a natural progression of things. But and this is this is probably a separate podcast altogether, but there is a lot of companies that are more profitable at 10 million than they are at 50. And so you go bigger. Yes, we get bigger, and I think this is the niche that we try to slide into, which is, or at least what I do. But I think with how much of the strategic and operational areas of business you guys talk about at CTC, where I don't think most paid media agencies do, is how do you try and retain the profitability that you had at 10 million at 50? And how do we ensure that we don't inflate our costs? Because I'll tell you what, there are a lot of founders of companies that were going, man, at 5 mil, we were making $1.5 million profit. And now at 30, we just made 200 grand last year. And we are playing with fire. And I don't know how to do it.
But so, yes, I totally agree with you. I think the challenge is that you have to accept some part of the premise. So let's imagine I said I wanted CTC to be $10 million in revenue forever because that's where we were the most profitable. Mm-hmm. my number one cost, you know what it is? It's not even close. It's people. So if I'm going to maintain my margin, what I'm saying to all the people is you are going to make no more money. And you know what would happen? They would all leave. They would all leave. And I would deal with constant churn, and I would backfill them with somebody at the same salary position and same salary position. And that would have to be a choice I would make because it would be beneficial to me as the owner of the business in a way though. But I've watched this game because what happens, like one of the biggest things founders do when they go from 20 to 50 million is, you know what other line item increases? Their own compensation. Because what you were making as a CEO at 10 million, all of a sudden you've tripled your own salary to 50 million. And all of a sudden the idea of going back to that personally, and same with all your leaders and same with all your key people. And it's this lifestyle inflation that becomes like, are we really willing to go back? And was that margin creation actually about the acceptance of this lifestyle delta in some way, that the office wasn't as cool, the lunches weren't paid for, no one asked about gas reimbursements? Like there's just a bunch of things that sometimes it's hard to figure out, or is there something about the product market piece? It's just a hard problem. And I don't know that the idea that you sort of stay small works very well.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right answer. And I do think that the growth, no matter what, for the sake of spending more, is a very American mentality. You know, it's very much like a consumeristic driven mentality of needing more things versus this element of satisfaction at a certain level. Now, I'm somebody that is absolutely a part of that. I'm not saying that I'm at all removed from it. I struggle with that as well, especially with 3 young kids, that I want to do this thing and sign up on that, be on that soccer team and do all of the things that come with it. So I think, to your point though, it's a really difficult thing to challenge to navigate. And that is where I think having advisors that have been where you are trying to go before is really important, to hold you accountable to the things that you say matter to you at 5 million, to ensure they still matter to you at 30 million. And that's where I think there's a ton of value in partners like you guys, where you talk about the strategy and the operational expertise of things, where you go, hey, yeah, you think you're doing really well, but look at your cash flow. No, you're not. Like, you're just putting yourself in a terrible hole, or sort of just navigating in the earlier stages and helping people set things up the right way. But
all right, this is great. We could wrap, and we'll have you on more to do this. But follow, are you still It's Casey Holiday, or did you get to Casey Holiday on Twitter?
The Kansas City holiday events category is completely saturated. I had nowhere to go. It's Casey Holiday is the only way I could get any.
All right, well, there he is. He's on Twitter. He's doing CEO coaching. He has walked and learned a ton along the way. Thanks for joining, Cory. You got another, what do you think? How many more years you got in you? You're 12 years in. You told me you'll ride till the wheels fall off. Are you still in?
I'm going till the wheels fall off.
All right.
I mean, yeah, no. As long as you'll have a microphone, I'll be here behind you.
I appreciate it, y'all. So hopefully, my hope with this, and I know we kind of meandered today, it wasn't as tactical as we are normally, but I know that a lot of you are in these different moments and experiencing, and I want to normalize your experience for you, and just know that, like, whether you're in the Blue Frog bakery days, or you're in the 200 people stage, like there's beauty in all of it. There's stuff to be learned, but nobody showed up on Twitter and didn't walk through all those same bouts of insecurity, the doubts or the uncertainty, or not sure exactly how it's going to work. Like we all did. And so appreciate you listening.
I'll just chime in. Can I chime in real quick on that?
Yeah.
So I think one thing on that to try and retain the magic, because truthfully, I had 100 employees and I've had 0, and I really appreciated each stage of it. It's not, one necessarily isn't better. It's just different. And some people, their gifts are more aligned with certain stages of a business. So I think that's critical to understand. But one constant that you can hold for yourself is what you choose to care about. So if you care about the people who work for you at 1 employee, continue to care about them when you have 100. Or if you care about the customer, like deeply in your soul, can maintain that as you scale. And if you can do your best to try and hold yourself accountable to what you cared about, what you won't do with a penny, you won't do with $1 million. So what you chose to care about early on, you can still possess a lot of the magic that came along with the smaller stage of it at a larger stage, as long as you choose to care about the same things.
There you go. Go forth and care. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Like and subscribe.
There he is. Producer credit.
Yeah. See ya.
See ya.